Hi everyone, I just wanted to go over how to approach the discussion for the UNDRIP, or the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Now, one of the things is that we're doing a discussion now on something fairly small, just because I want to give you some practice on how the course works. But one of my students, who is actually in my school, came to speak to me about it, because what I did was I linked for you a teen version of the UNDRIP document, and I realized that even though the articles are short, the teen version is really short. So what I've done is I've changed your due date. So I've given you the weekend to work on this as well, so it's not due till Monday night now. Although this is up soon enough that it may not take you that much time. But just to be fair, if I make a mistake, I'm always going to err on the side of caution for you. Secondly, I've added the full version of the UNDRIP document. So I'm going to, right now I am pretending to be a student, and I'm in Activity 2, the Indigenous Worldview, which has all the content you need. And I've also updated for you the announcement on the front page that's just warning you I'm doing this. And I actually may go back and add a link to that, I'm not sure. But anyway, so check that. I have checked that there's an update, so it'll show up here. Even if you've dismissed it, you'll have a little red dot on your notification bell. So this is what I suggest. So when you're in the discussion, you will want to look at the full version of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People for the actual article that you've been assigned, but you might want to still take a look at the teen version to get the flavor of it, and also to take a look at maybe how the teen version has explained it to give you a better understanding. So I am going to click on the full version, which is here, and it looks a little less colorful, and then I also have the teen version here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Article 18, which I have not assigned, and how you might go about that. So I would read the original article that you've been assigned. Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making in matters which would affect their rights, through representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own Indigenous decision-making institutes. Then I would look at the teen one to get some idea of how it was simplified, because you have to summarize it, and you might sort of take your, I don't know, your cues from the teen version because someone has summarized it for you. So don't take it exactly, but you might want to use that as a guide. So Article 18, participation in decision-making, is a little bit simplified in the teen version. Indigenous people have the right to take part in decision-making in all manners affecting them. This includes the rights of Indigenous persons to select who represents them and to have Indigenous decision-making processes respected. So, the first thing you want to do is summarize it, and you might say something like, in the UNDRIP document, Article 18 states that Indigenous people have the right to participate in any decisions that are made that affect their rights, such as land rights, such as the right to education, such as the right to, as you see above, the right to follow international domestic labor laws, say. And if anything affects those rights, they have the ability to, or the right to participate in how those will come about. So if there was a land claim, for example, in BC, that would affect their land rights, so they have the right to representation. And what's also interesting about this, and obviously when you type this out, it's not going to be as conversational. But once I get teaching here, I can't stop myself. So what is also interesting is that they have representatives chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, which means that it doesn't have to be an elected official the way that settler Canadians elect an official, for example. But there could be a tribal council that settles on picking someone who will represent them in the matter, and that has to be respected as well. So they can choose who will represent them however their procedures say they're chosen. And then they also have the right to maintain and develop their own Indigenous decision-making institutions. So, for example, if there's a land right issue, there could be a council of people that are chosen to represent the Indigenous group in discussions about their land rights. And that body, that decision-making body, they can develop and maintain that without outside influence. Like someone saying, oh, well, when we have our group of people who meet about land, we follow, this certain rules of procedure, or we don't allow smudging, or we allow women, or we don't allow women, or the decision is made only if there's a quorum, or that is like the right number of people to make a decision. So there have to be more than 50% present. All of those things are, sorry, I have a cold. All of those things are, might be rules that are followed in the country, in their democracy, in the way the democracy works, say, like in Canada. But it doesn't have to be the way that Indigenous people make those choices. There's a right here for Indigenous people to use their own traditional decision-making procedures and institutions. So when you're thinking about this, take a look at, even though there's only a couple of sentences, you see that there's an awful lot here. So there is a little bit of thinking you have to do. I didn't assign this one particularly because it's a little bit like law-y. But still, you can see that you can get quite a bit out of these sentences. So then I want to think about what question might I ask the class that would be a good question, one that you couldn't necessarily Google, one that you have to think about, one that allows a couple of different perspectives. So maybe I would ask something like, can you think of an instance when an Indigenous decision-making institution might differ from a decision-making institution in Canada? And again, I didn't pick this one because there's a lot of law kind of behind this, but that would be the kind of question you could ask. And so you've got your summary, you've talked about a question, and that question, like I say, has different perspectives. It requires a little bit of thinking. I also asked you to see if you could figure out how it would connect to a worldview. And obviously nationhood is here because the right is a right that protects people, Indigenous people, and their right to be a sovereign nation. It could also include something like land, because if their land rights are involved, then they have the right to be present. Sometimes you'll hear people say nothing about us without us, meaning no decisions are made about Indigenous people without Indigenous people being present. So that's how I might go about this, and then, refine my question a bit, shorten up my summary, have a sentence or two that talks about how and why this is nationhood, or how and why it could affect something like land or spirituality. And then pose your question to the class and see what kind of responses you get. So I hope this little video has been helpful. And if you have any more questions, feel free to post something in the help thread.